Welcome to the Books of Titans podcast hosted by Eric Rostad. Join him on his 15-year journey through the immortal books. He'll share what he's learning, explore profound ideas across time and cultures, and share the one thing he always hopes to remember from each immortal book.
Let's have some laughs today and get into the comedy plays by Aristophanes. Today I'm going to cover Clouds, and this play is contained in book 16 for my 2025 reading list. Well, I recently finished reading all of the Greek tragedies by Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, and now I'm starting in on the comedies. So this was my first one, Clouds, and I plan to read all 11 by Aristophanes. There are 11 that survive out of 40 that he wrote. So this is going to be fun. Right away, I started noticing differences between tragedies and comedies. And I had heard this pithy little statement earlier that tragedies took the form of something that starts out tragic. There are some comedic elements in the middle, but then it ends tragically. Whereas a comedy, it starts out funny. It starts out with comedy. There's tragic elements in the middle, and then it ends on a funny note. So I'm going to see if that's true. I know that's a very just high level, like this is a general way that these work, but I've noticed a lot of other differences so far, and so I'm reading my second comedy by Aristophanes right now. But what I've noticed in the first two, at least Clouds and then the next one, Birds, that they take place in the current time, whereas tragedies occur in a mythic past. So that's one huge difference just right up front. And then from the other thing I've seen so far is they're kind of a mix between like a Saturday Night Live and a roast, where a Saturday Night Live might poke fun at some of the cultural norms or at things going on in the culture, and then a roast pokes fun at an individual. And in Saturday Night Live, they'll oftentimes make fun of people, politicians, and that kind of thing. But most of the time, those politicians are not actually in the audience. Whereas with a roast, the person is sitting right there and they're getting roasted, and that's just kind of part of the fun of it and what makes it so funny. So this is kind of a combination where the comedies are poking fun at what's going on in the culture, but then they're also poking fun at individuals. And the thing with this is that some of these individuals probably would have been in attendance at the play. So for instance, in Clouds here, Cleon, who is the ruler, he's just getting lambasted, and then Socrates also is disgraced and mocked throughout. Cleon, I looked up to see if Cleon was in attendance when this was performed in 423 BC, and they don't know for sure. It was in the midst of the Peloponnesian War, so chances are he was probably out fighting as the performance would have taken place in the springtime. But Socrates, they say he was there, and so that is interesting. In fact, with these plays, they're wearing masks, and I guess the story is that Socrates stood up when the person playing Socrates came out, so that they could see if the mask and all that mimicked the actual Socrates. But then there's no information about what happened afterwards, because Socrates is just, there's some awful things that are said about him in this play. So I'm curious if he would have taken offense at that, or if that was just kind of everyone was there having a good time, having fun. I don't know, and I don't think we know, but the fact that Socrates would have been there is mind-blowing in just, sitting there and getting these jabs this entire play. There are another big difference in comedies and tragedies is that there are instances of breaking the fourth wall. So the fourth wall, like the actors in the audience, you don't break that wall. You don't address, like the actors don't address the audience directly, but they do in comedies. And there's one example, right here with the chorus. They address the audience, and they actually address the judges as well. And so in this instance, they're saying, "We want to tell you, judges, what you stand to gain if you support us, Clouds, by voting for us, who deserve to win." And they go on from there. So as with the tragedies, these comedies would have been performed and it would have been a competition. So we do know that this play got third place, which is not good. And Aristophanes was upset about that. And so the version that we have of this play is a revised version. It's probably a second or a third version of the play. And that's kind of the one of the main reasons we know it, because the chorus is addressing the judges, and then they say, there's another part where it says, why did you vote so poorly for this play? It got third place. Maybe you guys are all morons or that kind of thing. And so there is this breaking of the fourth wall, which is interesting. And it strikes you when you read it, because it's like, oh, you're not supposed to address the audience directly, but that's part of it. And so these comedies, what I've seen so far, and again, I'm going to read 11 of them, so I'll have more to say as I go through them. But they are not lofty like the tragedies are. You're not looking to this mythic past. There's a lot of banality in them, a lot of farts and language you just wouldn't find in a tragedy play. But with some of the tragedy plays, there were satyr plays, satyr, that accompanied these tragedy plays. So there'd be 3 tragedy plays and then a satyr play. In the satyr play, I like to think of those as if you went to see a fraternity put on a play, it would probably be a satyr play. So just, crude jokes and that kind of thing. So there was an element within the tragedy kind of genre where they had these satyr plays, which were more in line with comedies. I think what the comedies have done so far that are above and beyond the satyr plays is just the roasting where you're talking about a person directly. And with the tragedies, again, in the satyr plays, you're looking at a mythic past. So you're not talking about a Socrates that is probably in attendance, or a Cleon, a ruler, or some of the leading people of Athens at the time. It just, the stories themselves wouldn't have allowed for that. So that's another huge difference here with the comedies. So the story itself of the clouds, from what I've read in the introductions, is that a lot of the comedies follow a plot structure of a great idea. And so the great idea that is found in Clouds is the main character, Strepsiades. He is in turmoil because he is in debt. And the reason he's in debt is his son, Phidippides, loves horses. And so his father's, buying horses and all these things to make his son happy, but now he's in a tremendous amount of debt. He owes a lot of money. And so the Strepsiades sees a way out of the debt, and the way he's going to get out of the debt, and this is the great idea in the plot structure here, is that he's not going to go the traditional route of paying the money back like one would, but he's going to seek out Socrates to teach him the new arguments. And so this is where we get into, and we saw some of this in the tragedy plays of talking about rhetoric and persuasion, and this idea that you could lie to get what you needed. And there were people that were teaching this line of reasoning to where no matter what you said, whether it was the truth or whether it was a lie, you could get what you want if you used the right word, if you used kind of this new argument. And so that's what this Clouds is playing off of. And so Strepsiades here, the main character, he's wanting to learn these new arguments, these new ways of lying to get your desired ends. And he's going to seek out Socrates to have him teach. So Strepsiades enrolls at the school that Socrates has, and it's called the Thinkery in this play. And what's so funny about this is that Socrates just keeps asking him questions. He's not, the thought is like, Socrates is going to teach him. And I know that's the Socratic method of questions, but it follows suit in this play as well. Strepsiades is learning, but he's just being asked questions. It's not like Socrates is sitting up there just, this is how it is. But in that process, he ends up upending Strepsiades' traditional belief system. And the description of the Thinkery is that it's a place where you go, and for a fee, a person will be taught how to win an argument, no matter if it's right or wrong. And so later on in the play, in what I just think is a really brilliant way to do this, right and wrong are personified, and they debate each other. And so you've got right argument as a character and then wrong argument, and they're going back and forth, and I'll read some of that later. But in one of the other translations, it's called right logic versus wrong logic. Another translation just simply has it right versus wrong. Well, Socrates gets fed up with Strepsiades, and so Strepsiades has to send his son to also learn these new skills. Again, just for the purpose of being able to get out of this debt, to use arguments to get out of these debts. That ends up backfiring, and Pheidippides begins beating his father. And so you just think of it's one of the worst wrongs you could do is to beat, to just start hitting the person that raised you. And so this is what happens. And Pheidippides has learned these new arguments, and he's using it to upend just kind of the traditional, a traditional beliefs. And so that upsets Strepsiades, obviously, and then Strepsiades, the play closes with him trying to burn down the thinkery because of all this. And as you can imagine, he doesn't get out of the debt and all that. So I read the translation by Aaron Puchagian. And I also read the intros in the Penguin Classics edition by Alan Summerstein, and then a Bantam Books edition by Moses Haddis. So those, I love just checking different introductions and seeing what they say. The Aaron Puchagian one has 4 plays, and they're Clouds, Birds, Lysistrata, and Women of the Assembly. So I'll be reading those 4 first, and then I'll get into some of these other Penguin editions and other editions to get through the other 11. This podcast will have 2 more segments. The next segment, I will cover themes, 3 different themes that showed up in this comedy. And then in the final segment, I'll share the one thing that I'm still thinking about. Well, if you listen to any of the episodes I did on the tragedies, you knew there were 4 things that I looked at, 3 to 4 things in each tragedy that I would pay attention to. And some of those are relevant to comedies and some of them aren't. And so the first thing I always look at is who is the chorus. And again, the chorus is kind of this connection point between the audience and the actors. They kind of help you make sense. You think of 10 to 20,000 people attending these plays. The chorus is there to kind of help you make sense of what's going on. They oftentimes will take a side of the characters or go against the characters, so you're getting another vantage point. But the chorus in this one is made up of the clouds. And so they represent the inspiration in thought and in language. But they're goddesses, and they replace the traditional God structure. So the location is Athens, and again, it's a modern time. We're not looking back at a mythical past. And so usually I'm one of the things I'm looking at of the 4 things is time frame. And so time frame in this is not before the Trojan War or something like that, but it's modern day and is taking place during the Peloponnesian War. So there are references to different generals in the war and things going on kind of at the time. A lot of references to people who would have been in attendance, making fun of how they looked, certain aspects of them, characteristics of them, that kind of thing. And then the first speaker is Strepsiades in this place, the father that I told you about in the first segment. So let's get into 3 different themes in this comedy play. So the first is just of clouds. And so basically what's happened here in the way Socrates defines it is that the clouds have displaced the gods. So they've displaced the traditional gods of Zeus and Athena and all them, and now the clouds are who they look to. And from what I read, like a lot of this is not what Socrates believed, and even like taking a fee, as I mentioned in segment 1, Socrates would not take a fee. And so there's kind of like what Aristophanes is doing is compiling a lot of different people into the person of Socrates. So by saying what I'm saying in this, it doesn't mean the actual Socrates believed these things, but it's just kind of a mixture of all the different people teaching at that time. And so we've got the gods being replaced. And here's one statement by Socrates. He says, he's praying to the sky. O king, immeasurable air, who hold the earth suspended, and you, ever gleaming ether, and you, high goddesses, the clouds, who send the thunder and lightning. O queens, arise, show yourselves floating to your contemplator. And I'll stop reading there. And so you get the idea that the clouds have replaced Zeus. So the clouds who send the thunder and lightning. Well, traditionally, it was always Zeus who would send lightning. But as Socrates argues here, and this is part of where he's teaching, but he's almost teaching through these prayers to the gods, to the clouds. He's giving the idea that we don't have to believe in these gods anymore because the clouds are actually what produce what they did. And so here are some of the things the clouds can do. And this is Socrates speaking again. No, they are skyborn clouds, great goddesses to the layabouts. They fill us up with thoughts and quibbles, mindfulness and nonsense, circumlocution and deceptiveness and comprehension. End quote. And so that's some of what the clouds can do. Next up, we've got that the clouds can assume whatever shape they wish, and you just think of the gods kind of having that role. They could come into any situation in the Iliad. They can assume any person. They can just kind of show up in different manners. But here, Socrates is saying, well, the clouds, they can actually do that as well. So there's just this like page after page of dismantling the gods and saying, actually, the clouds are in the place. And if you just look up, you can see the clouds and that kind of thing. So here's a back and forth between Socrates and Strepsiades about this. So Socrates starts, yes, the clouds alone are goddesses. The rest is nonsense. And Strepsiades says, well, what about Zeus? Don't say Olympian Zeus is not a god. Socrates says, what Zeus? Stop talking nonsense. There is no Zeus. Strepsiades says, what are you saying? Who does the raining then? Explain that to me first of all. Socrates replies, the clouds make rain, of course. I will convince you of it thusly. Have you ever seen Zeus make rain when there are no clouds? He should be capable of raining when the clouds are gone. Strepsiades says, that argument has won me over. Still, before today, I really did believe Zeus pissed the rain. But tell me this, who is it that makes the thunder, and what makes me tremble? Socrates says, the clouds do also when they roll around. And then it goes on from there. Socrates even says this, think how immense a fart then issued from your little belly. Isn't it likely that the boundless air could make a giant crap of thunder? End quote. So, that's where some of the fraternity type language comes in and just kind of crude jokes about farting all over. And so thunder comes from clouds just as your belly creates a fart. So it's clouds creating this thunder kind of like that same way. Later on, Strepsiades says, who is it though that makes them start to move? That must be Zeus. And Socrates says, no, it's ethereal vortex. Strepsiades says, vortex? No one told me Zeus is gone and vortex now is ruling in his place, but you have yet to teach me the reason for the thunderclap. And then they go on from there. But you almost have this first mover question. What makes the clouds move? That must be Zeus. No, it's ethereal vortex. So, but you get this idea that Socrates has replaced the gods and he's replaced them with the clouds, but you still need a vortex to start everything. So it's just kind of like a replacing. But what that does is it opens Strepsiades to kind of accept anything else from there, because Socrates has removed the foundation of Strepsiades' belief. And so later on, you see what is my second theme here of changing language, and that's something that Socrates does after he's dismantled the gods. He changes language. So here's a part where it says, but there are, and this is Socrates speaking, but there are other things that you must learn first, namely which animals are rightly male. And Strepsiades responds with this, well, if I'm not insane, I know that the males, ram, billy goat, bull, dog, bird. Socrates says, that's very good. Now tell me which are female. Strepsiades says, ewe, nanny goat, cow, bitch, bird. Socrates says, do you see what you have done? You use the same word bird for both the male and the female. Strepsiades says, how's that? Socrates says, you called one bird the other bird. Strepsiades says, what should I call him then from here on out? Socrates says, call one birdette and the other birdus. And then I'll stop reading there. He goes through other things. I just found that to be interesting because when I read Confucius earlier this year, Confucius is training young men who are to be in government, and he says once you get into power, once you start your role in government, the first thing you have to do is to set the language straight. The things have to relate to their true meaning, and so you see really quickly. Socrates, the first thing he does is dismantle the gods. That opens Strepsiades up to accepting the change of language. And what's really interesting in this is then later on, so that's like page 42 where Socrates is doing this thing with language. On page 80 is where Strepsiades is in front of his creditors, and they come in one by one saying, "Hey, you owe me this. I mean, very tangible. You have a debt. It needs to be paid. This is not rocket science here. Let's get this done." And what Strepsiades does is start asking, "Well, what do you think about this word?" And then the person doesn't answer how he likes, and then so he takes it away from the tangible issue that you owe me money, and he starts it to be like conversations in the clouds, and it's his way of like dismantling an argument, and then he'll say, "Oh, you still believe that?" And so it takes it away from the tangible aspect of the thing that is being discussed, and just by simply changing language, it dismantles everything, and it's just really interesting to look at and to see this take place. Like, these things are happening in that society. So Aristophanes is commenting on this. He's commenting how people who study rhetoric and study persuasion, how they can get things done, but you're abandoning a foundation of truth by doing that. And so how can you do that, or how do you teach somebody to do that? And so Aristophanes is taking a comedic approach to it, but there are a lot of elements of truth in what he is saying. So just very interesting, and then even personifying the right and the wrong arguments was fascinating to read. The last theme I want to highlight in this segment too here is that of justice. And so let me read here. All right, let me see where we start. So this is a couple pages that I want to read here, but this is where wrong argument is having an argument with the right argument. So wrong argument starts and says, "Go and claim that you are right. I'm going to beat you all the same." Right argument says, "By using what clever reasoning?" And wrong argument replies, "By coming up with new ideas." Right argument says, "New ideas are all the rage." And then gesturing to the audience, so again, breaking the fourth wall, "Thanks to all these morons here," which is hilarious. And just let me step out of the quote here for a minute. There are just like hilarious parts of these play. I mean, they are comedies for a reason. I was laughing. There are some really funny parts and really clever parts and all that. But just, to think of right argument saying new ideas are all the rage, and then pointing to the audience and saying, "Thanks to all these morons here," is just funny. So then wrong argument reply said, "No, they are intellectuals." And right argument says, "I'll utterly obliterate you." Wrong argument says, "Come on and tell me, how will you do that?" Right argument says, "By arguing for justice." Wrong argument says, "I'll trash your arguments with my rejoinders, since I deny that justice exists." Right argument says, "You deny the existence of justice?" Wrong argument says, "Well, then where is it?" Right argument, "Among the gods." Wrong argument, "If justice is there, why hasn't Zeus been removed from power by chaining up his father Kronos?" Right argument, "Nauseating. You in obscenity have gone too far. I need a pan to puke in." Wrong argument, "You dark age windbag." And I'll stop reading it there. They keep going on for a while, and it just gets worse from there. But it's so interesting that concept of justice. And so right argument, "Do you deny that the existence of justice?" And wrong argument says, "Well, where is it?" Right argument, "Among the gods." And then just a very good point. So if justice is there, why hasn't Zeus been removed from power for chaining up his father Kronos? And you see that a lot. It's a question that comes up. You look at Zeus's affairs and just, you read the Iliad and the Odyssey, and you're thinking, well, the gods aren't that much different than the humans here. They're doing a lot of the same things. They are immortal, but they're doing a lot of the same things. And there's not like a god to look up to and like, oh, I would like to behave like that. If anything, it's almost the opposite. And so that's called out here of if justice starts from the gods, then but they're not just. How do you reconcile that? So just, some really interesting, amidst the comedy, amidst the just chaos of what's happening in this play, there are some just really interesting things to consider. All right, now into segment 3. This is where I share my one thing. So with the one thing, I'm always trying to remember one thing from each book I read or each play or that kind of thing. And what I found is it helps me remember other parts of the book. If I try to remember a bunch of things, I can't. I just end up forgetting them all. But if I try to remember one thing, it's one of those tools that just helps me remember not only that, but other parts of the play as well. So the thing that really stuck out to me and that I enjoyed the most was the personification of the arguments. So you had right argument come out as an actor on the stage and debate wrong argument as an actor on the stage. And I just thought that was so cool because at first it's Socrates talking about these ideas and he's sharing them with Strepsiades. And, that's one way to share ideas, but to actually personify them and then have them debate, that was really cool as well. And so I want to read a few different parts of that. But that's my one thing is just, it's such a neat way to use a play to talk about these things. So here's a part where wrong argument starts, and this is wrong argument's approach. So wrong argument says he can go first. So he's pointing to right argument. He can go first, and then I'll use newfangled phrases and grand conceptions to shoot down all his arguments. By the end of this, if he even mutters, I'll sting his face in both eyes so terribly with hornet-like debating points that he'll just die. That's the end of that. And then we get into right argument. Thank you. I will describe the old style kind of education, how people did things back when I, the advocate of justice, was in the bloom of youth, and self-restraint was all the rage. First off, boys never made even the slightest chatter. Next, from those from the same ward marched in order to their music teachers. And it goes on from there. Let me read later on. This is still right argument a few pages later. If you do as he directs, so now he's talking about wrong argument. If you do as he directs, you soon will share his faith that what is base is glorious and what is glorious base. And that part there, wrong argument later on says this: I was the first to come up with a way of speaking against both law and justice. It is worth 10,000 statters, this art of being on the losing side and yet still winning. And the quote there. But it was just a fascinating section of them going back and forth in that. And so that was my one thing for this comedy play, Clouds. So in conclusion, so far I'm a little torn about comedies. For reference, it did take me a long time to get into the tragedies. I had to read Aeschylus, the Oresteia. I had to read that 4 times just to get into it. I don't know why it was such a shift in my mind going from the Homeric epics to the tragedies, but it took me a long time. I'm glad I put that time in, reading each one 4 times. That helped with the rest of the tragedies, but it took a while. So maybe part of this is just getting into a new style, a new genre. Comedies are going to be different. I'm starting to notice these differences, but the reason I'm torn is they almost seem to have crossed a line that's certainly not crossed in the tragedies. Perhaps it's crossed in some of the sadder plays, but not in the tragedies. There's a respect for the story. There's no matter what the content of the story, no matter how horrific it is, there's a respect of it and a desire to learn from it. Again, we have a small segment of tragedy plays that survived, so I'm sure there were tragedy plays that were not this way. But the ones that I've read and the ones that have survived, there's a certain element of respect that is lost in these comedy plays. I did enjoy the arguments and how they would take things apart, some of the things that I shared in this episode. The other thing about comedies in conclusion here is that I'm very shocked that this was allowed. I mean, this shows like an incredible amount of freedom of speech, as well as just a certain attitude of the Greek people to laugh at this. Like, they didn't take themselves so seriously. I mean, the stuff written in this play is, some of it's nasty, it's crude, but it's about people sitting in the audience. And I just imagine, like, if I go to see a play, I do not want to go to see a play, get called out in front of 10 to 20,000 people of looking a certain way or being a certain way. Like, that would horrify me. And yet that's what's happening here. So there's a certain element of that just, it amazes me and it shocks me, I guess, that the level of freedom of speech, but then also just that people would have had a good time with this. But it introduces a question that, again, kind of on the part that I'm torn about is, like, was this innocent fun or were there ramifications? Because this play was performed in 423 BC, and in 399 BC, Socrates was tried and sentenced to death for corrupting the youth. And there's a part of this play where it talks about Socrates corrupting the youth. And so, and some of the stuff I looked up, just kind of brief research, so it's possible that this play did have a part in kind of leading in that direction of Socrates' eventual death, and that's disturbing. It begs that question of, was this innocent fun or were there further ramifications? Was the mockery of Socrates in this play, did that set a path forward? Did that open up things in people's minds to attack that eventually 24 years later led to his death? Again, we're reading a revised version of this play. There are some differences. So we have some snippets of kind of the first play, but I think the storyline would have been very similar. But yeah, it's just a question that's been bothering me since reading it of, did this go too far? I guess that's kind of the main gist of the question there. So I'll keep that in mind as I read the other 10 plays by Aristophanes, and we'll see what we find, and I'll share what I learn as I go on the way. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for listening. I'd love to hear from you, especially if you are a fan of Aristophanes, if you're a fan of the clouds. If I completely botched something in this episode or I missed something, I'd love to hear about that. The best place and the place I would appreciate for you to let me know about that is as a comment on this podcast episode. And you could do that on Substack. So that's where the podcast is hosted. If you add a comment there, other people can see it. We can start a conversation about that. I'm here to learn. If I said something wrong, please let me know. I'm not, I welcome that. So yeah, please let me know. Please comment on Substack on this podcast episode, and then other people can see that and can get a conversation going. You can follow Books of Titans on Instagram or Twitter, and also check out the website. I have a lot of resources there just showing the books I've read since 2017, my yearly reading lists, how I shifted in 2023 to begin reading the Immortal books, and how I plan over the next 15 years to read Immortal books by 200 different authors. And that's what I'm doing right now. That's the path I'm on, and I'm having an absolute blast. I'm reading these books in chronological order, and so that's why I've been in the Greeks here for a while. So I'll be back next week with another episode of the podcast. Until then, keep reading, keep learning, and keep listening. I'm out.